Hey everyone, welcome to the Aerial Robotics Work Group meeting for May 24, 2023. I'm joined by Kimberly McGuire from BitCraze. Hi, Kim. And we have a bunch of roboticists interested in aerial robotics today with us. Thank you everyone that joined us early, no, not early, on time at 7 a.m. It's 7:05, oh, actually 7:06 now, and we're ready to get started. Is everyone excited for another meeting? I know I am. Woo. All right, so for the agenda today, we got an introduction topic. So we're going to talk about tutorials and education. This is something that we decided in the last meeting. We had a quick poll, and I think we should discuss this. And we need to draft a plan for this. Afterwards, we're going to have quick discussions on how do you get started in aerial robotics. This is something that Kim's kicked off on the forums. There's also another question: what was missing and what is still missing? Any good examples or experiences from other robotic platforms, and any other questions that you might have. And then towards the end, we're going to reach a conclusion point where we're going to discuss the next scientific meeting, where we will discuss also how do you propose, maybe if you want to jump into the next meeting, and then any announcements that we might get. And with that out of the way, let's just get started with the introduction topic. So tutorials and education. There's no standard aerial robotics ROS tutorial. Has anyone seen any aerial robotics ROS tutorials? Any official or standard tutorial? Doesn't need to be PX4 or autopilot. It has just ROS in general.
Not in general, no. There's nothing on the ROS tutorial website for aerial. It's all ground based.
Yeah. All right. Do we have a sense on why that is? I have an idea, but I don't know exactly.
Just guessing, I think, because of the 2D navigation capability at the moment.
Yeah. Well, also
that was my guess too.
I think it's a teleop. Like the tutorials are for Turtlebot. Like the first tutorials are using Turtlebot, and you control that with 4 arrow keys. And the controls for a aerial platform are not as intuitive.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
At least if you're doing teleop.
Literally what it was.
I forgot to post the link to the meeting. I just put that in the chat.
I'm just gonna.
If you want to power through.
Gerald, there's a bit of a background chatter. Oh yeah, I think you saw it. Thanks.
Gracias, Gerald. So do we think we need like if we had a dev kit for aerial robotics, would that help? Or a few dev kits available? And then that's one, because maybe Turtlebot is one of the answers why the tutorials are for ground robotics. But what if there was like a Turtlebot aerial with wings? Would that help, or would that still mean that we still stuck with 2D navigation and we have to make the jump to 3D navigation with everything that is involved in the learning curve going from 2D to 3D? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, can you hear me first of all?
A little bit low.
Okay, let me try moving. Okay, I'll also speak a bit louder. So is it now a bit better?
It is much better. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think one of the main problems that I saw with my students, if you're talking about academic students, the problem is that with aerial vehicles, aerial robots, there isn't a standard stack of controllers, estimators, like something that is all in one that you actually can put together quickly, just like in ROS. Or in ROS, I think this is already the case for ground vehicles, manipulators. There is something that they can put together, and then they see something working, and then they can dig deeper into how is this working, and they can learn ROS with those robots. So I think in aerial vehicles, aerial robots, there isn't this kind of full stack that is very popular, that is also supported by ROS. So it is like ROS based inside of ROS organization. I know that there is Kim already put together in the Discord. There was a question about what stacks are they, and we saw the AeroStack presentation, for example. So I know that there is something going on in PX4. Of course, there is also a lot of tutorials in PX4 about how to do it with PX4 settle, software in the loop simulations. But I think there isn't ROS supported full stack of that students and newcomers can put together and they can start working with. I think this is the main problem, in my opinion.
Go ahead, Gerald.
Okay, another problem we have seen, or I have seen since we have started connecting ROS to a flight control, that there is no clear documentation which messages are really needed to control a vehicle. Especially in PX4, the software is changing that fast. There is no standard, and also that you have to enable all or compile in all your messages first on both sides is not very handy for development. It would be nice to have things defined as a standard that are needed for controlling a vehicle, and they are there by default, so that you simply take your companion computer running Linux, putting ROS on that, connecting that to a flight control, and there you go. That's not there. It needs a lot of investigation and a lot of tweaking until you are there. And that, I think, the entry is too high at the moment to let people start. So the entry level. That's my feeling. That's what I've seen. With our students working here, it was a lot of investigation that had to be done to get ROS working with PX4, and then it was always a custom solution. Yeah, so you cannot take it one development and use it for something else, because there were other requirements. Yeah, so as I have stated, standardization would be needed there.
Thank you, Gerald. That was really helpful feedback. Does anyone else want to share? So far we've touched on the need for standardization on the interfaces to control an aerial robot through ROS. Also, the need for developer kits that are as accessible as the TurboBot. Theo, do you want to speak up as well? We can't hear you, sorry. Oops.
He left the meeting. Perhaps he has some problems.
Browser problems?
Not so common.
Yep, anyone else? And Aham, you mentioned academic students, robotics, you have a standard stack. Yeah, standardization as well. Theo.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Nice. Sorry for that. So just a quick question. Do you think the RSF would agree to like back one project among many, to say it's the project that we back as the ROS developers, and that everyone should start by using this kind of controllers, this kind of autopilot, and etc. Would they agree, or is it something politically incorrect?
I can't speak for them. I would say that if I were in their shoes, I wouldn't just back one, especially when you have an ecosystem of a lot of different packages already brewing. I would, however, do push them to build the interfaces and standardize as much as possible within them, so that the experience for developers isn't that wild from one project to the other. But part of why we're doing this landscape or this work group is because we want to inform them of what's available and what's needed from the ecosystem. So if we bring them that information, I think they would be eager to make a decision on that.
Yeah, because I don't have the history behind the Turtlebot, but is it something they developed, or is it something they adopted and said that's what will be the starting point for everyone starting with ROS?
That's a good question. I have no
I don't know.
answer for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think that having more kits would be a problem. Yeah.
I started on the next page, by the way, Ramon. It's getting a bit too small.
Oh, thank you.
Unless there's no more comments, then I have then I can delete this one.
Anyone else have any comments? All right, and then are folks still using ROS 1, or are we jumping into ROS 2R already?
ROS 2 is the way to go for us.
I mean, I'm still. There are some projects within our research group that we're still using ROS, but the main reason is that those ongoing projects, it would be a bit too much to move to ROS 2 at this moment. But of course, ROS 2 is the way to go. And to be more a little bit also, the context is that we are mostly using ROS with MavROS, MavLink, and PX4. So this is the tool chain. And now we are using, we're moving to ROS 2 plus PX4.
It's the same at my laboratory, exactly the same.
Okay, then I'd like to have added for us ROS 2 with PX4 and fast DDS. So we don't use MavLink or MavROS. We use fast DDS messaging, and moving towards Seno. So running Pico Seno on the flight control, that's something we will look into next, to get Pico Seno included in PX4. And then use Seno OH at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I know which one you mean. I'll correct this later.
Okay.
Yeah, or I will correct it in the meantime. Just a question about the Zeno. That's instead of fast DDS.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Just to make sure that I understand it.
But yeah, to be honest, this was a little bit.
From the Ardu pilot side, since we added ROS 2 support, we've had a bunch of researchers asking about it, but I think that they're all very excited that it's there and know that they want to, like the research labs want to move to ROS 2, but for people in the middle of their thesis or for PhD students, it's completely unfeasible to migrate ROS versions in the middle of your work. So I think that there's going to be, the researchers are bleeding edge in terms of the algorithms that they're developing, but the frameworks that they're using is really hard to transition. And you don't want to necessarily have half the lab in ROS 1 and the two PhD students that are in their fourth year, or those still on ROS 1, and then everyone else on ROS 2, because it splits the experience of the lab. So I think there's definitely some challenges from the research groups that have a limited amount of time, and they're not trying to develop a software product. They're trying to make research, right? So they have different goals, but I think like commercially at AeroVironment, we're full in on ROS 2, and we have the funding to do the migration in time.
I might also have a slight comment here. Like, of course, like open robotics is as like if you're just starting out with ROS, just doesn't matter if it's an aerial vehicle or a ground robot. They say you should start with ROS 2, which makes absolute sense if you haven't even started a project or you're not building upon a project that already exists. I guess what maybe is also kind of the issue, because ROS 1 has been around for so long, there are way more types of tutorials and even slight aerial robotic tutorials that are all made for ROS 1 now. I guess we have to do some kind of research. I found one website that was called Aerial Robotics that actually had some ROS 1 tutorials, but this person stopped halfway, which is a bit too bad. But yeah, I wonder, like, is there any ROS 1 tutorials from aerial robotics that maybe should be, transferred, I guess. I don't know. Like I tried Hector quadcopter, but it was mostly simulation part, I feel. But
Yeah, so ArduPilot has a Google Cartographer tutorial, and we just got a Google Summer of Code project accepted that's going to port that to ROS 2. So I think that'll be one of the first official tutorials is a visit. So that's going to be vision-based localization. And we're not going to do control, at least and there's 3 phases of that project, and that's the first phase. So we'll have a tutorial. It's going to be on the ArduPilot wiki, but I think that if based on the discussions here, it might make sense to put it in the ROS tutorials instead.
yeah, I would say why not? There's a couple. I think maybe a slight example is the WebBot simulator. They actually made an official ROS tutorial on the ROS website itself. Even though Gazebo is the one that Open Robotics Foundation is more using, they actually just proposed it. So I think it's not that the Open Robotics will say no.
Yeah,
no tutorials here, but it needs to be grounded, of course, and it needs to be perhaps, like, I'm not sure, like, in terms of safety, if they want to have build instructions, it would be better indeed, like, coming back to the standard platform question.
Yeah, the biggest blocker for that to me is that the tool chain is completely different for the autopilots than it is for the ROS. And we've done work to make it build with Colcon, but there's still a bunch of dependencies and environment setup you have to do to get it to build that can't do in a package XML because it's not Debian or anything like that.
Yeah, I was going to ask about tooling as well.
Yeah.
I want to talk about tooling and simulation. Should we talk about tooling now?
Yeah, let's see, because
Right,
I missed the. Yeah, I'll change this to tooling.
Yeah, what about the tooling that we're using to build your ROS code or anything going on the flight controller and the interaction with both? I've already heard that it's not great and things are constantly moving. Does it make sense to maybe invest in the tooling right now? Now, there's also not a lot of good ways to do integration testing between ROS and whatever is on the other side. And that is a big problem if we want to standardize or make more robust interfaces. Has anyone given any thought into this?
The tooling. So we use Gazebo for simulation, but we had really a hard time, or my students that worked on that, trying to integrate an ultra-wideband sensor into Gazebo simulation. Really had a hard time. She was saying there are so many dependencies if you set up Gazebo and get it built. I think 13 repos roundabout you mentioned, and that was a nightmare. And I think that is also a big problem. That if you have something and your compiler stops and you need to spend a week to figure out that maybe there was one repo changing, that's not very handy for users. So.
All right, thank you. Anyone else have any experience with the tooling or simulation?
I'd say that I mean, there's so many different build tools and build like macro tools, and I feel like if as we are working with ROS, if everything could be compiled by Qualcomm, it would be better. But I think, for instance, Base 4 is using pure make and not even CMake. If I'm not mistaken, maybe I'm mistaken, but
CMake.
but I mean, I felt like it was a double work to learn how Qualcomm works and how CMake works, and then how pure make works to fully understand the tooling of everything that is needed to actually fly a drone. Ultimately.
Thank you. Do you think if, let's say, the autopilots provided you already pre-built binary that you use work against, would that help?
Well, I don't know, because I mean, I think there's a script that compiles everything. So I mean, this works because when you just clone the repo and build it, it works fine. But then when you want to change some things and build it a bit differently, or add a few options, then you really have to understand the build tool, right? So I don't know. I think we're talking here about how an autopilot or the whole like code chain needed to operate an aerial robot integrates with ROS nicely, and I think for now it's really two different parts of codes that you really have to dig deep into and to learn, and then once you're competent on the two different blocks, then you're good at the aerial robotics, right? But knowing only ROS don't allow you to fly a drone. So yeah, I don't know because I think Qualcomm is quite used in the ROS community in general. So if it's a tool that we state is a good tool, we could use it for everyone.
Thank you. That's a good feedback. Anyone else have anything to share here?
Yeah, so for us, they're the two main things. So we solved the tooling issue by making at least an autopilot of making it build with Qualcomm, which was sort of hacky to get that working, but it's there. But the two main things for us are integrated testing. The ROS2 launch ecosystem is really steep learning curve, and it doesn't have ability to do reuse between certain aspects of the launch description file. And that makes doing testing really hard, because we want to launch 7 or 8 processes to test our system. And if we want to change a way something is done, it's not like a parameter, but it's more of we turn this component on or off. We have to rewrite the entire launch stuff, and it's not maintainable.
Yeah.
So to promote, so we have like CI running for doing this integrated testing, but there's a ton of code duplication right now, and we're pretty worried about the maintenance burden for that. And then the other thing is the same. Simulation actually is a little better, but there's I'm not the expert to talk on the simulation, but Rice from the autopilot organization is also working on that. I'll have to come back with what the missing tooling in the sim is. I think most of it's there with Gazebo Garden. There was just a few small things.
And Ryan, are you supporting only Garden, also Gazebo Classic?
No, we're not working on Classic anymore. We're just going with Garden.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else have any questions, any issues? Anyone want to comment anything?
You mentioned a kit before. Do you see this as tool as well? If yes, I think it was mentioned one of the statements that it's hard to learn because you need to know, be an expert on both sides, the drone flight control. I think to get more people on that, it would be helpful to have a kit where the flight control portion is already configured, that the vehicle is tuned as it should be, because you could spend weeks on getting your vehicle flying well. That's not that complicated on a ground-based vehicle with an PID controller, but on a multi-rotor drone that could be challenging. So therefore, a kit that has default software that is set correctly could help in getting more people on playing around with ROS to use aerial vehicles.
I guess perhaps I would like to also put a comment on that. So, like, is it like, do you have kind of duality between, of course, like you need to be an expert in both, and we can, for instance, like we can provide a kit that already has some standard controllers and can already fly quite well. But I guess the important thing also is like, how important is it to know as a beginner with a aerial vehicle to understand also the autopilot system, because it is potentially a more dangerous thing. Maybe it is perhaps important for anybody that starts out in aerial robotics to have a basic understanding of how autopilots work and what controllers are and what an estimator are. Maybe not in full detail, but or at least like about safety features. Like, okay, of course, Crazy Fly is safe, but as soon as you just put a little bit bigger propellers on there, like a turtle board is big, but it's safe. Unless we have to make the kit super safe, but it still remains a unstable platform. You can kick it, and it will crash. If you kick a turtle bolt, and not a lot of. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Please don't kick your car.
And I think, maybe that's going too far, because if you work with an aerial vehicle, you also need to know the legal rules. And if we like to start on that, I don't know. It's different in Europe than in the US and in Asia. So if we start with describing what is needed to be allowed to fly a drone outdoors, then
connected to like we have like
thank you, Gerald. We have another raised hand by Miguel.
I'm going to start on the next page, by the way.
I already did that for you.
One comment that regarding this platform, for example, we are trying to configure this PX4 Vision kit that is like, as someone said, is like a already built and drone that in theory it has their own onboard computing and all things should be configured to be ready to fly. But for ROS 2, there is nothing, there is no this configuration, and in our case it's been super difficult to make it work in ROS 2 and be able to know how we have to configure this to make it like easy to fly out of the shell. And maybe if the tutorials that are for ROS 1 are pretty good, so maybe if this is like improved for ROS 2, could be like one platform that can be used for just for beginners to have something that can fly in indoors and outdoors. You can tweak things and know more about how a real drone flies, but also make some like more computational expensive task using this onboard computer.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel. Yeah, the PX4 Vision kit was a very, very early effort by our team to address this problem. But I think it had a lot of shortcomings. The interfaces between the the companion computer and the flight controller were not really good, and the software needed to do that wasn't really scalable. At the time, we were using the PX4 avoidance library, which was using MapROS and ROS1, and that got deprecated a few months afterwards. So this brings out a good question. So if we have kits, hardware kits, is it enough if we ask the manufacturers to provide the kits, or do we actually need to ask them to build the interfaces to put everything together? Or do we standardize and just ask the companies to provide the components, and we as a community support standardized documentation or as much as possible, so that any user that knows that purchases a kit that has, I don't know, it's ROS capable, knows how to interface with the companion computer and knows how to talk to the flight controller and has the standard size of messages already, which is the way to go here.
Well, the hardware manufacturers aren't software companies, so I don't see them like Holybro. Do they even have software developers?
They do,
Yes.
but you're
Okay.
right, exactly. That's exactly why I'm asking this question, because
Yeah.
I deal with manufacturers all the time, and they have no problem like putting in resources to address some issues, but it's one thing to ask an OEM or a manufacturer to build a kit for you, and it's completely entirely to ask a drone manufacturer to build a product for you. And we need to define where do we want to draw the line here, and so that we also can inform those manufacturers what they need to build. Because right now there's a lot of uncertainty from them as well.
Well, yeah, but if there is, for example, one image that can be provided and download and be set up into the companion computer, for example, in that case, this is something that can be done for the community, and the people that just buy this product has to do the setup. And this can be easily upgraded and improved by the community, so by the software community, not for the manufacturers. So I think something in the middle is the best solution.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, the support burden is sometimes too great.
I would like to comment that Bitcraze is mostly a hardware company with software developers in there, but our scale is very different. Like we don't have a companion computer. Like it's all the ROS is off board, so it's just a different scale. And I would definitely understand if like manufacturers that make like these bigger kits, they have to need to have some kind of focus as well. And it kind of also depends on the business model, I would say, because maintaining software next to making the hardware is a lot of work. But it's worth for at least, like, I usually call it our marketing, the the software that comes with it, because it's of course like, you know, it's the thing that actually makes it fly. But we spend quite a lot of time of it, and technically that is not the core business that's puts in the money, let's say, like that's from the sales. So sometimes we do have the discussion, aren't we putting too much effort on software development in that sense? And yeah, we're not using Peaks4, we're having our own firmware. So it's kind of a balance, I would say. And I think Miguel also got a good point there. Perhaps it should be kind of a balancing act of how far should hardware developers go into making it compatible enough so that others can continue the work, because that's also kind of like, you know, that's also kind of an art of providing good APIs so other people can build upon that. And where do you stop? Like where, yeah, just giving some kind of insight from a
So
hardware
Kimberly,
company, but also the software development.
yeah. So you need a companion computer. Looks like.
True. I guess maybe the AI deck is one. But it's only 20 grams. I don't know if you've flown with Crazy Flies before.
I've seen them. I'm working with a team that will bring next week some Crazy Flies to an event, and there I'm able. We are also a hardware manufacturer. We are even a semiconductors company. But
Exactly.
we're
That's even more hardware
doing
than
a
we.
lot of reference designs. And by the way, I've posted something in the chat. We have a drone kit because we are running a competition since some years already on PX4 in the standard hardware.
So yeah, basically like.
And we have recently developed also a companion computer based on our IMX8M Plus. And the last competition was done with the combination. And if you look up Power Games on Hackstar.io, the people have done a lot on ROS there recently. So Ramon, you know, maybe something like this we could work on. And we also try to describe on our own Git book how the setup needs to be done, how the software needs to be combined to make it work. We are not that far yet with the companion computer side, so the ROS 2 thing needs some more polishing, but at least we have an image for the companion computer, an Ubuntu-based one, with the ROS packages already included. So you can flash the image and you have a working Linux system with Ubuntu overlay and ROS packages. That's the first link in my post. It's the 8MP NavQ.
Thank you, Gerald. Sorry, I was muted the whole time I was speaking. A question on that image that you made for that companion computer. Do you see trying to maintain that going forward?
So we
as
are
an image?
actively maintaining that, yes. And so
Right.
we go for the LTE versions as usual. And if a new LTE version is there, we will also update the image.
Yeah. Has anyone used Snaps
Oh yeah.
or any other package management?
To be
Yes, we
as,
have used it before.
all the sensors.
as an alternative to providing the full image with everything installed in there.
Cable.
Would be nice, but we are not yet there.
Yeah, no, we're not. Definitely not yet there. But I was thinking that it would be a lot of wasted effort if you're putting in your image and time to make that, and then everyone else is doing the same thing. Sort of maybe makes sense if we make packages available for known platforms instead, and target those instead, so we can all maintain it together instead of having to maintain one single image per company, and lower the burden of maintenance there, and at the same time increase the community, decrease the learning curve for a community to come in to any given platform, because it works the same way as, say, let's say the Turing works the same way, or at least in theory it works the same way. Would that help?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some work that's already done to build an image for a Raspberry Pi that has ROS 2 installed. And I think it's like the ROS desktop full, but it doesn't include any flight software or any of that tool chain. But I think it's definitely a start. And after having gone through the process of having to refigure out how to flash a Raspberry Pi and install ROS 2 and build it from, first I built it from source and then realized it didn't need to. I think that documentation of, I mean, on an aerial platform, you have to deploy on a companion computer, right? So having documentation on how to set that up, it would be a little more helpful. That's in the main ROS tutorials rather than just discovering some repo online that shows you how to do it.
Yeah, right. I've also seen people try to build Autopilot in PX4 within the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I
Which
think that's normal because cross-compile toolchain isn't maintained by ROS, OSRF. They deprecated that. So you pretty much have to compile on source nowadays, unless you're like really experienced.
Maybe we should note that.
As a developer, right? As a developer, you have to. If you're just making tutorials, you can make binaries and that's fine.
Yeah, I personally have tried to do tutorials on PX4 and ROS before, at least 3 times already, and I'm giving up on having like a really nice install script. At first, I tried Docker to containerize everything, and it works, but it's a really long investment to get it working. And then if it's just a one-off, after a few weeks, it's gonna get old, and you need to maintain that. And then I moved into Vagrant and have this whole image already as a VM. And that sort of works better, but it's still not the great experience. So I definitely think at least if we're gonna start offering tutorials, we need to define how we can approach that. Maybe the solution is to have this one build system that does everything for you within Qualcomm. Whatever it is that happens afterwards. Kim, you wanted to speak?
I forgot what I wanted to say before. I was just thinking because I tried to apply for, like, I was way too late with starting with it, like for the ROS Developer Day, and they do use ROS Jax, which already has like some kind of type of nice web-based VM environment. It's a kind of limited somehow, but I'm wondering like how they don't really have a lot of aerial vehicle examples on that one. But they have like a nice way to kind of like connect to it and things like that. And then you already have the full environment already available, but then a web-based VM. Yeah, I don't know. It's just something that came to mind. So like that might be also an option too. But I guess like it's just yet another VM, albeit limited, but it's kind of really made for beginners. It's too bad that I couldn't submit anything to that, but next time. I don't know if you guys heard of ROS Jax software. It's from the Construct. They have actually quite a lot of tutorials. I think if we're like one of the topics that I talked about or proposed for today, they are, I would say, also like next to ROS itself, the ROS documentation itself, they're a good example of good tutorials. But anyway, that's all. It's more of a comment than a question, I would say.
I think if we can get the gazebo stuff figured out, and having a ROS checked for doing aerial development would be pretty awesome as a tutorial, because I've done a few of those tutorials and that platform is pretty excellent. The fact that you can just open a web browser and you have a gazebo simulation and you don't have to install any of the dependencies.
I do have to say that the ROS checked were like, it really depends what, I guess maybe the type of computer you had or the kind of subscription that you have, that it tend to be a little bit slow. So yeah, I don't know if that's a gazebo problem or a ROS check problem, but yeah, it's something to consider. I hope to play around with it at least for some crazy flight tutorials, but yeah.
Actually, I've never seen this before.
ROS checks or
yeah, ROS Jax.
Well, I think the developer day, that's coming up in, I think, July. Not sure. Wait, I will look it up. So they have you can just make a tutorial whenever. So like in whatever time you want. Like, you know, it's kind of like you can make one right now. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, indeed. That's the call for the one that has been added to that. It might be a nice platform for that, at least to get started. But before, perhaps we should maybe talk about standardization of a couple of these tooling, or like how to build everything. But at least like in this, you can have, okay, this is the current state, how to build stuff. We've tested it. Like a VM.
Yeah. Gerald, go ahead.
Since we have the statement of Ryan, Raspberry Pi has images full on with ROS, can we please add also Neptune Plus has images full on with ROS as well, please?
Yep.
I've put the link into the chat. Yeah.
It's in.
Thank you.
It's now also in the notes.
Thank you.
All right, we have 10 more minutes, and I want to continue with the discussion. Here we have other items on the agenda we're not going to be able to touch. But
Yeah, I
to
don't know. Those were just like as suggestions. But I guess like I feel that there maybe are not yeah, maybe there are not any people that just started out of aerial robotics. Perhaps like we're all developers. It's perhaps a bit far away in our memory, like when we started to get started with aerial robotics, right? Like, you know, we're old and rusty, and we had to do it the hard way.
Well,
So everybody should learn
8
it the
months
hard
ago.
way too. But I don't know. Like, is there anybody that just started out or is starting out?
Well, oh.
Tietum, are you just starting out or?
Test? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we can hear
Oh,
you.
sorry. No, I started, I really started 8 months ago. I did a bit of ROS before, but not really with aerial robotics. But I really started with UAVs 8 months ago. So I think it's quite new, but honestly, my feeling is that when you're just following the tutorials, it works quite well. We have PX4 Vision also, the first version, that's the 1.5. And I mean, it worked well with ROS 1, etc. But then when you want to do more evolved stuff, like I don't know, I worked on migrating to Gazebo Garden because we were using Gazebo Classic before, and then the SITL version of PX4 wasn't working. But I mean, with the right, everything is on the internet. I think it would be easier if we had more tutorials, of course. But I also know that it's really, people have to write tutorials for them to exist. So it's hard to access that for benevolent developers, of course. But I still think it's doable, and I feel in 8 months I've learned almost everything that is needed to fly safely PX4 Visions. So yeah, I don't know what to add. It was a bumpy ride, but everything works in the end.
with enough motivation.
With enough motivation and of course have this, like, I have to achieve it because it's my PhD thesis also, so I don't have any choice.
Yeah.
Good forced first learning process. Went exactly through the same thing. Not with ROS though, but with UA. You just have to. You just have to use it. That's the. But yeah, no,
Right.
but it's
We have-
good. It's a good view on you know, at least like how to like what is still perhaps missing. So thanks for sharing. Sorry, yeah, I will leave the lead to you. I'm taking over a bit too much. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Thank you. We have another raised hand. Sia. Very low. We can barely hear you.
So yeah, we cannot hear you.
Not really.
Yeah, like. Yeah.
Yeah, some of us had to leave the meeting and come back in order to make it work.
Yeah, sometimes if somebody else is joining Google Meets in a non-Chrome thing, it's there. Sometimes are
Not great.
issues. Yeah. Well, I'm in. Don't tell anybody. I'm in Edge now. But it's Chrome
All
based
right.
these days. But yeah.
So for the, I guess we have a lot to go on the tutorial discussion, and I guess we, as soon as we can, we might be able to define what a basic tutorial should be for ROS in aerial, and maybe we can standardize it in a way, or not standardize it, just make it in a way, neutralize it in a way that doesn't matter what's on the other side for the flight stack, if it's NAP2, if it's Bittrace or Autopilot or PX4. There should be a certain set of things that are the same.
Is it possible to do an aerial tutorial without using anything from the other side projects that using ROS2 control and nav2 and whatever's available in Gazebo. Is there even like a way to control plane or a quadcopter without having to rely on the controls and the embedded systems and that code base?
Kim, you want to respond that? Or Miguel?
I will go according to the official. No, well, I'm actually currently busy of working out that with to write a ROS driver for the webbot simulator for the Crazyfly, and I was exactly thinking about that. I managed to connect nav2, but of course there's no 3D planning. Okay, that's one. There is no quadcopter control in ROS control currently. It's either ground robot based or arm robot based, as I know so far from the very quick scanning and very unscientific research I've done. So I actually had to write a cascaded PD controller myself. Yeah, or use like some kind of Python bindings. I believe like Peaks4, you guys use some kind of like some kind of bindings or some kind of part of the firmware to have software in the loop. That is perhaps, but it's very autopilot based, I guess. And I guess if you want to have the control somewhere else from the autopilot, then then you also have to think about delays if you have an off-board controller as well, and that might be also perhaps slightly dangerous. I don't know. But at least in the ROS control, I haven't found any quadcopter controller.
I think it would be more easier to start with off-board control, because then you don't care or do not need to take care about the vehicle itself, about the geometry and the tuning and all this stuff. You just are sending target waypoints from ROS to the flight control, saying, move to XYZ here, and doing that continuously, and that's how you control your vehicle movement. And then you don't need to take care if it is a fixed wing and multi-rotor. Okay, a little bit you need to take care, because a multi-rotor can behave differently than a fixed wing. You cannot move at one position up and down with a fixed wing unless you have a VTOL. But the way how you control it, how you need to set up the software, is then independent from the vehicle. And that would be, I think, the easier way forward if we start with something like this, that we say, we assume we are in off-board control mode, or we have a flight control, we can control it in off-board control mode, and just firing target waypoints or vehicle pose messages, something like this.
Thank
Yes.
you, Gerald. We have we have two raised hands. I have, and then Miguel.
I think Gerald said exactly almost what I wanted to say. So that's thank you.
Thank you, Ayhan. Miguel?
Yeah, that's exactly what we wanted to pursue with our framework, that you don't have to take care explicitly about which platform you are using or which robot configuration you are using, regarding that, as Gerald said, it's not the same flying a fixed wing or a multicopter, but yeah, we try to to abstract this platform layer, and try to, okay, I just want to give, I don't know, velocity set points or position set points, and see and make a mission without actually taking care about all that goes below this level. And
So more high level lab. Low level should all be taken care of. And
yeah, with the simulation, it's easier to integrate because, for example, we've worked with Ignition and well with the new Gazebo, and their quadcopter module, as I remember, it only gives you like velocity commands. You cannot go like easily into, for example, motor commands or things like this. So it's pretty easy to just integrate this one quadcopter in this gazebo and do some flights just taking these the velocity commands, which is it's pretty similar what you do in the turtle bot in the turtle scene when you start in ROS 2.
All
Yeah,
right.
I think for
Kim?
ROS 1, you had the ROS Rotor S project where a lot of things have been ported to Gazebo already. But actually, a lot of those things has not been ported to the new Gazebo, as I know. But that is perhaps a next one of the next meetings we can talk about simulation more closely. But it's yeah, all good points indeed. But Ramon, looking at time, don't you?
Yes, I need to leave to have another community meeting that I need to
Yeah,
run.
I can
But
close off if
let
you like.
me
Oh
no,
yeah,
let me
sure, go
close it
for it.
up.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
everyone for joining us today. We have one last thing that we really need to touch on, which is the next meeting. We're proposing that the next meeting is on June 7th, same time. Is that the same time? I think
Yes,
it is.
2
Yeah.
p.m. UT. Yeah, universal time, universal
All right.
coordinated time.
We're gonna set up a process so that if anyone wants to present on this work group, we're gonna have a form that you can apply to. But for now, please send us an email. There's already, I think, 2 people that want to present on the next one. We'll let you know as soon as possible on the forums what's the agenda for the next meeting. And I think based on this meeting, we're going to post the recording. We're going to post the meeting minutes. And I think we got enough to continue the tutorial discussion. So I'm going to open a forum post specifically for tutorials and tutorial discussion. It's okay if we touch on kits and hardware kits, but I think the next meeting, we're going to have someone that's going to talk more about hardware, and maybe we can take that lead and continue the hardware discussion then, and we can focus the discussion on tutorials for now. Thank you so much for participating today. This was really amazing. I honestly didn't think we were going to cover the whole hour with content. This is amazing. Yeah, I already said amazing 3 times. That's enough for me. All right, I got to log off. Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you so much, everyone. I got to move to the PX4 Community Q&A. If you want to join that, you're welcome. And talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Right. I will just close the recording now. All right, awesome. Thanks for leading this time, Ramon. He's already gone. All right. I kind of feel that perhaps the tutorial was so there were so many comments. We might need to have like maybe another discussion meeting about that next time in the future. But let's kind of switch it up in topics. But very great input, people.
Kimberly, do you think
Yes.
it would be possible for I don't know, for specific meetings where we know we're going to talk about, I don't know, DevKit, for instance, to ask people from different companies that are really involved in the development of aerial robotics to join the call?
Sure, yeah, I think we should definitely encourage that. Like I try to at least because for instance, like today is now about tutorial education. I invited some people that have written tutorials before. Fortunately, they were not able to join, but I think maybe like now the focus was more on the people that have to learn and how to make it easier for them, other than the people that have to write the tutorials. Because that's a whole different story, right? Like the tutorials, you have to maintain it as well, documentation and yeah, automated tutorials. I looked at that well. So that's also kind of a topic, perhaps a separate topic. Apparently, it has to be a separate topic, but yeah, I think if you know anybody, if for instance, like we have scientific meetings we do scientific meeting, discussion meeting, developer meeting, then scientific meeting. So on the 7th is going to be a presentation by one of us about their project. And then, so it's only going to be about that. But the meeting after that, so that's not 7th, but it's 2 weeks after that, it's going to be a developer meeting. So if it's going to be about hardware, which we're going to announce on this course, then please go ahead and invite anybody that you think would be interested in it or would like to have input in that. Yeah, yes, sounds like a great plan.
All right, thank you.
Did I actually close the recording? I did not, but I guess it was not it was not